These military men were brought into governance was in 1958. And they were brought into governance because the Islamic ideologue, the ruling elites in Sudan, did not want democracy. They did not want the democratization of a political system and governance. Hello everyone, do not forget to subscribe to support the channel. This video is to talk about something that Sudanese analysts, especially those who have not been marginalized, who have not experienced what it means to be marginalized, because South Sudanese and other people, the so-called peripheries, especially the Darfur, the Abyei, the Nuba Mountains, and the Southern Blue Nile. So these people know what it means to be ignored by the power center or to be brutalized by these powers. So what is happening now in Sudan is a shock to Sudanese, especially the residents of Khartoum. To other people like us, we've experienced this. We know what it means to be brutalized by these men. One of the things that sort of surprised me is that many analysts, Sudanese and foreigners alike, have sort of focused on the geopolitical dimension of the conflict. That it was something that was engineered by Americans because they do not want Russians to establish a military base on the Red Sea. So this is seen as a way to frustrate Russians. That may be the case, but what we need to understand is geopolitical problems have always existed in Africa. They've never left Africa. Whether we go back to the years of transatlantic slave trade, imperial colonialism, or the two world wars, the Cold War, they've never ended. So foreigners have always had interest in Africa, whether because of minerals or because of just control, sort of quasi-imperial control. So to say that this conflict in Sudan is geopolitical in nature is to basically say nothing, because they've never left. Now what I want to emphasize is internal issues. The issue of military and governance, the issue of ideology, especially the uniting ideology. In Sudan, the first time these military men were brought into governance was in 1958. And they were brought into governance because the Islamic ideologue, the ruling elites in Sudan, did not want democracy. They did not want the democratization of the political system and governance. The reason why they did not want democracy is because they wanted an Islamic state. They wanted Sudan to be ruled by Islam, a sort of theocracy. And when you democratize the system, the decisions are made based on consensus by the different elements within the country. So that would compromise the establishment of a constitution that is based on Islam. So in 1958, there was some sort of a nascent democracy. Southern Sudanese and people from Bija people from the Nuba Mountains, Southern Blue Nile, they wanted to have some sort of a Pan-African collegiality to sort of say, look, we need a federal system, we need a non-Islamic inclusive constitution. That would have frustrated the agenda by the Islamic ideologues in Sudan. So what we say, or what we now call a coup in 1958 by Aboud and his generals, was seen by Southern Sudanese as the handing over of power to the military to stop political debates. And by giving the power to the military, it protected Islam. So political parties were banned, political debates were banned, the talk of the federal system was becoming a punishable offense. And it was the period where South Sudanese, especially politicians, started to flee the country. So what is happening today, what brought the military into the political system, is something Sudanese elite engineered. So we are not going to be surprised how the military became really interested, because once you establish a system, it's difficult to break. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is uniting ideology in Sudan. when South Sudanese were fighting against the North reflected Southern Sudanese as a problem. They saw them as a geopolitical problem because they see the problem in the South, the so-called Southern problem, or the problem of Southern Sudan, Mishkil al-Junub, as a creation of the British. And then after independence, the grievances of the Southerners were seen as instigation by imperialists, that it was the West that wanted to control Sudan. The idea that what Southerners were saying is respect for the humanity, respect for the inclusion, respect for the ideals and the cultures. That's all they were asking for. So when people are saying, look, we want a united Sudan as long as we're included with respect, that's all we want. That was reflected as a problem, the Southern problem. But these people were just saying, look, we don't want to be marginalized in governance, in economics, in cultural ideals. We don't want to be sidelined. We don't want to be marginalized. That's all we're asking for. Include us with respect. That was reflected as a problem. So anytime South Sudanese spoke or they rebelled, the northern elite would say, look, they're being instigated by the West, by imperialists. They did not listen to the people. And that was the problem. So to northern Sudanese, they did not understand what Southerners were fighting for. They only saw them as agents of imperialism because the narrative was filtered by northern elites, and then what was told to the northerners was something that instigated them against Southerners. Now, Southern Sudan was a boogie, so it was seen as Christian and it was against Islam. And that has been a narrative throughout the history of Sudan. And that also united the North, because most of the people in the North are Muslims. Now we know there are many Africans in the North who are Muslims, but they're still Africans. At first they were united with the North, but with Arabs by Islam. But then we know now things have changed because many Sudanese who are Africans and they are Muslims used to see themselves as Arabs. Now they don't. So that's a different case. But without Southern Sudan or South Sudan now, what is the uniting factor? What would unite Sudanese? If we say Islam, then that's not going to be adequate because there are many Sudanese intellectuals and politicians who want a secular government, a secular political system. They are Muslims, yes, but they don't want a theocracy. They don't want a system that is run based on Islam. That's one. The second thing is, they are Africans, as I mentioned, who are Muslims, but they want the Africanness to be acknowledged within the political system. But many Sudanese elite who are Muslims and they identify as Arabs want Sudan to be reflected as an Islamic and an Arabic country. So anyone who comes and talk about giving an African face to Sudan may be a problem. So that's one dimension of division within Sudan. The other thing is Muslim Brotherhood. Bashir, the foster boy of Islamists, especially led with Trabi and the Brotherhood, they want Sudan to go back to what Trabi had envisioned. Even if Bashir has been removed, they're still in Sudan. And they want things to go back to the status quo. So the Muslim Brotherhood will fight those Muslims who want to secularize governance, want to make Sudan a secular state. So these are problems that will come in. I'm not even talking about what is happening between Hemeti and Burhan, because these are military men. They may stop, but they will come in still and fit in within this dynamic. So the question is, what would unite Sudanese after the war? Because I know it will end. Because these people, they don't have a cause. Hemeti doesn't have a cause. Burhan doesn't have a cause. Burhan just wants to make sure that things transition based on what he wants or what protects his interest. The moment you taste power, it's difficult to let it go. Hemeti is very sleek. He repeats consistently that he wants a transition too. The civilian rule. That may be true, but he already has a power base. He has an army. He's already tested power. He has also influenced global and internal, so he's not even worried about the transition to the civilian rule. As long as the inclusion or dismantling or RSF is done in a way that he wants. So these men will go. But at the end of the day, what is going to unite Sudanese? Not Islam, not Arabism, not democracy, because people who don't like, especially Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, do not like democracy. So it's time for Sudanese to think about the future of Sudan. Yes, I know South Sudan has the same problem because North Sudan as a boogie is gone. Sudanese needs to think about how do you make sure that you have a uniting ideology that is going to be progressive, that is going to include Africans, that is going to include Arabs, that is going to include people who identify as Afro-Arabs, people who are Christians, people who believe in their traditional religions. What is the ideology in Sudan that is going to include? Or what is the political system that is going to be established to include them? Do not tell me democracy, because democracy is new. Democracy has its own challenges, especially in Africa, where we still have ethnic divisions. I know one of the things that Islamic elites wanted to do was to homogenize Sudan based on two factors that John Garang highlighted: Islamism and Arabism. They wanted everyone to ascribe to Islamism and Arabism so that it unites everyone across tribal lines. That was maybe a good intention, but it did not. It wasn't operationalized in a way that was peaceful and conducive for other people to embrace them. But today, what is